Here's the problem with Tito. And Tito's just a really dumb human being. He's not intelligent at all. He's very, very fucking stupid.
Today, we're gonna talk about finding funny in unlikely places. This week, we'll be discussing Instagram reels displaying former UFC champion Tito Ortiz speaking like an idiot, where if you then go to the comment section, you'll see the current president of the UFC, Dana White, trolling the shit out of him.
Google Tito Ortiz talking, okay?
I can
You
tell.
know you're fucking stupid, Tito. You know you are, so.
You will see Dana White commenting, "My boy."
You live and you learn.
You live and you learn and you forget, I hope.
He's done this as recently as a couple weeks ago from what I've seen, but he's also been doing this for at least a full year.
Fighting philosophy is, go hard and go home.
And it never stops being funny. Welcome to Catching You Up with
Nadav. It's so good.
Now is a good time to remind you to comment, like, and subscribe. It all helps the algorithm. But before we get into it, I'd like to thank the executive producer of this episode, Mr. David Finkel. Without his big baller support, I would probably sign up for a lower tier fight league where they use me to pad up an up-and-coming champion's record. So, yeah, sure. The next Sugar Sean O'Malley has a 15-0 record, but that's because he's been fighting 15 guys that look like me. But because of David Finkel and his big baller support, I don't have to do that. And if you'd like to become a big baller supporter of the show, you can go ahead and click the Patreon link in the description below. So let me say this, Tito Ortiz is one of the earliest faces that, to me, were popular on UFC. And at some point in the last year or two, these compilations of him talking like a complete buffoon have been getting into my algorithm. And it's the funniest fucking thing I've ever seen.
Now it's about my kids. I want to outlive my children, of course, 100%.
What parent says they want to outlive their kids? Is this CTE? Is he just stupid? We don't know. But what we do know is that it's funny.
As you guys get older, is it harder to get your bodies into the shape that's required to go at each other?
Not with me. I've only been off for a year and a half. I'm only 43 years old. I'm an old mature. I matured old. Very fast, but at the same time, my body hasn't matured great, just because of my father's really old. My father's 80 years old. My grandmother's 100 years old.
Some could and would attribute his speech patterns to brain injury. But there's some pretty early clips of him talking real stupid.
15 years is 2 decades.
And that's what I found funny for the most part and was posting to my stories nonstop. It's just, he just speaks so stupidly. And only recently did I notice Dana White has been commenting on all of these posts, just saying, "My boy." So incredibly petty and so incredibly funny.
I woke up about 6:30 this morning. Yes, 6:30 this morning. I never wake up at 6:30 in the morning unless I'm going to sleep.
But I thought to myself, why is this going on? Why is there this feud between Dana White and Tito Ortiz?
You see a lot of guys' records who have losing records but still fight for championships. Guys who are 5-4, 5-2, 5-1, 10-1, 10-10.
So thanks to a lot of fight commentary YouTube channels like MMA On Point or Flashback MMA, I've been able to kind of piece together a timeline that might explain why they're not the biggest fans of each other, but let me fill you into how we got here. Dana White started in boxing in Boston and got run out of town by Whitey Bulger. He then started getting into mixed martial arts, took a jiu-jitsu class where he met Tito Ortiz, and then eventually he became his manager. Dana negotiated some great deals on Tito's behalf.
I'm a totally different person than I was 12 years ago when we fought. I'm faster, I'm stronger, I'm younger.
But in negotiating with the UFC, Dana started seeing some real money problems with the organization. And that's where he convinced the Fertitta brothers, who he was friends with, to buy the organization, make him president, and let him run the organization in a way that would create lots of financial opportunities for everyone involved. But in doing that, it became a conflict of interest to manage Tito Ortiz, so he had to drop him. And from what I've seen, Dana was a pretty ruthless negotiator. He would say, hey, these are our terms, and they'd say, sorry, we can't do that, and be like, well, all right, well, we'll just go to the next place, and he'd hang up. And Tito would be like, hey, why'd you do that? He's like, don't worry, they'll call back. And then they do call back, and that got him the deals that he wanted. And Tito got treated like the champion that he was. First class, PJs, presidential suites. He was just red carpets were rolled out for him everywhere that he went. Hey, let's take a quick break and thank the sponsors of this episode. If your car breaks down, you're gonna call a mechanic. If your dick stops working, you're gonna get Hims ED. Hims provides men with access to affordable sexual health treatments, and everything is done online. With a huge range of doctor-trusted ED treatments, like chewable hard mints, Viagra, Cialis, and more, it's easy to find something that will work for you. You don't need insurance, and one low price covers everything, from treatments to ongoing care. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/Nadav. That's HIMS.com/NADAV for your personalized ED treatment options. HIMS.com/Nadav. The products mentioned are chewable compounded products which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscriptions required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. Thank you, Hims, for sponsoring the show. I'd also like to thank the next sponsor of the show, CBDistillery.com. If you've been looking for a natural solution on what ails you gotta check out CB Distillery. Their plant-based solutions for sleep, stress, and muscle pain are changing the game. Life doesn't have to be so stressful. Incorporate CBD into your routine and see how things change for you. 90% of people report better sleep with CBD, and CB Distillery has over 2 million satisfied customers. I've been messing around with some of their enhanced sleep CBD gummies, and let me tell you, it helps get me to sleep and it helps keep me asleep. If you're still turning to remedies off grandma's medicine shelf, it's time to switch to CB Distillery. Right now, you can save 20% with promo code Nadav at cbdistillery.com. That's cbdistillery.com, promo code Nadav. cbdistillery.com. Not available in Idaho, Iowa, and South Dakota. Thank you, CB Distillery, and let's get back into the show. But when Dana transitioned from cutthroat manager to ruthless president/owner of the UFC, the attitude that he'd use in negotiating is now being flipped onto the other side. Now, unfortunately, the same ruthlessness that got Tito Ortiz all the great deals like the PJs and the presidential suites is now negotiating against him. So he has now gotten downgraded to coach economy tickets on planes and regular ass hotel rooms.
I came in at the best shape I possibly could, and I was a tip-top shape, and Chuck didn't. Chuck came in with his mouth, run his mouth. He was cashing checks and his mouth couldn't cash.
And although the roles had changed, from what I've gathered, the turning point in their relationship happened on a private jet.
We were on a private plane, the Fertitta brothers, myself, Tito Ortiz, and Joe Silva. And Tito and I were messing around, and he put me in what's called a neck crank. I was tapping, and he didn't stop. I just started blasting him in the ribs, started punching him in the ribs, and when he let go, just jumped up, and it was a full-blown fist fight in the plane, and we were literally taking off. And the Fertitta brothers had to jump in and break up the fight. So then I sat on the front of the plane, he sat in the back of the plane.
And the relationship soured after this, to the point where Dana was publicly cheering against him in these fights.
They said if you don't learn from your losses, you can never learn anything to process your future better from your wins.
Now, at some point after these Chuck Liddell fights, Tito's contract with the UFC had come up, and it was time for renegotiating. And I believe negotiations went sour to the point where Dana said, the UFC will never employ Tito Ortiz again.
And watching his 30 for 30, and Chuck said the best, it was just like he was happy fighting because it made him happy. If you have a job you're happy with, that's your job. My job is to be successful and try to do other things to transduce into other stuff.
And Tito went around shopping. I think he had some negotiations with Pride Fighting. He had some a contract with TNA Wrestling. And after being gone for a year, somehow Dana was convinced that Tito does still carry a lot of value with him. Oh yeah, and also something to keep in mind during all of this is that Tito was talking shit on the main star maker of the organization, which is a show called The Ultimate Fighter, where it put a whole bunch of fighters into a house, and it had 2 coaches, there were 2 camps in the house, and every week they would just make people square up against each other, and it will end in a huge all-star fight. One of the best hype machines that a fight promotion had ever created. And Tito Ortiz came out publicly saying, yeah, UFC is training its future superstars to accept mediocre pay. And it's funny, with Dana saying that he is never going to employ Tito for as long as he runs the UFC, and him talking shit on The Ultimate Fighter, wouldn't you know, Tito Ortiz gets contracted to be one of the coaches in The Ultimate Fighter. I believe it was against Frank Shamrock. Was it Frank or Ken? Ken. It was Ken Shamrock. So while this is all happening with The Ultimate Fighter, and maybe I'm getting some of these timelines confused, but Tito Ortiz and Dana White challenge each other to a boxing match. And Dana White was like, oh, I'm gonna beat the shit out of him. He's gonna be fucking embarrassed.
I look at that and it's funny because I talked to my girlfriend Amber about this, and people from India, they really have great respect for each other. They have no racism, it seems like. It seems like my friends who are Indian, and not Indian here from, or from the United States, but India from India.
And for a while, everyone was pretty excited about it until Tito Ortiz pulled out due to injury. He's like, look, my knee is sore. I have this fight with Shamrock coming up. I can't do this boxing match. So the boxing match did not happen because Tito pulled out. And I think that added to more saltiness on Dana's end.
Tito, 2021 is a wacky year, is it not? If I told you a year ago that you'd be boxing Anderson Silva, what would you have said to me?
I said, actually, that probably would have happened. But with what's going on in 2021, I would have never thought it was happening is going on. My mind has been blown. But once again, it's America, and we got to keep fighting, right? We got to keep fighting, keep our head up, and just put our chin down, and that's what I'm going to do on Saturday night.
And then he has the fight with Ken Shamrock, and it just breaks records for pay-per-view buys. Tito and Shamrock had 2 more rematches and broke the pay-per-view record each time after that. So as much as Dana disliked Tito, he was still a moneymaker for the organization.
Tito Ortiz, what happens when we die?
What happens when we die? I leave a legacy behind me that I've helped people, that I've been a factor in somebody's life in a positive manner. And knowing that it was Tito Ortiz that helped me get through that hard time. That's what happens when we die.
And eventually, he retired from the UFC. But I think the fight on that private jet and Tito pulling out of that boxing match just led both of them to publicly speak terribly about each other. But as Tito started getting to the end of his career, I feel like that lightened up a little bit. Dana's like, yeah, look, fucking the son of a bitch made me a lot of money.
And I don't have any beef with Tito anymore.
Which is what makes this shit so much funnier. My boy!
It's about a lion, king of the jungle, this huge lion with a big giant mane in this hot, smothering weather in Africa. And the little small lions come up, kind of poke at him, bite on his ear, bite on his neck. The lioness comes over and bugs him. Then you got the jackals and the rest of the wilderness looking and seeing these lions on that mountaintop. They come over and bother him. The jackals laugh at him. The hyenas laugh at him, nip at his toes. They eat all of his food, and they sit back. And they got jackals like this who think it's a comedy.
It really is endless and mostly harmless. Like, if you just go on Instagram and type in Tito Ortiz and then just start scrolling on the reels, very quickly you will just run into compilations of him misspeaking publicly, and Dana is in those comment sections. And it's funny as fuck. It never stops being funny. And I'll say this, Dana White is so much funnier than he rightfully should be. And I hope I never stop seeing him in Tito Ortiz's comment sections, because I respect it and I'm here for it. And I hope you enjoyed the episode this week. Lord knows I did. And with that, I'd like to say that I hope you found this episode fun and or funny. I'd like to thank everyone that you're seeing on screen right now. They are all supporters and producers of this show. Without their help, it would be hard to put this out as regularly and consistently as I do. And if you'd like to become a supporter of the show, you can go ahead and click the Patreon link in the description below. But most importantly, I'd like to remind you,
This is a totally unconfirmed news.
we'll see you next week.